Picture this. It's the 1800s. Your brother's got a cough that won't quit. Your sister looks like she hasn't eaten in weeks. And half your family is wasting away. What's the logical explanation? Germs, malnutrition, bad water. Nope. Clearly, someone in your family has come back from the grave to suck the life out of the living. Solution? Dig up grandma and check if she's secretly undead. Yes, before Dracula ever hit the shelves, real people across Europe and even America were convinced that vampires were literally clawing out of their coffins at night. And these panics didn't just spark creepy bedtime stories. They led to real exhumations, mutilations, and a kind of 19th century CSI vampire unit. Today we're digging, literally, into history's real vampire panics, where superstition, disease, and mass hysteria made people do some truly unhinged graveyard DIY. The problem with the undead. So why did people think their loved ones were turning into night stalkers in the first place? Simple: tuberculosis. Back then, it was called consumption, because it looked like the sick person was slowly being consumed from the inside out. They grew pale thin, coughed up blood, and wasted away over weeks or months. To the average farmer in 19th century Rhode Island, or rural Eastern Europe, that didn't look like a bacterial infection. It looked like some evil force was draining the victim's life. And if multiple family members were dying in sequence, well, clearly, one of the recently buried had come back for seconds. Here's the fun part. Once the suspicion of vampirism took hold, townsfolk didn't just gossip about it. They grabbed shovels. Vampire CSI. Okay, so how did a community actually prove that the dead were still moonlighting as bloodsuckers? Welcome to Vampire CSI. Step 1. Dig up the suspect. Villagers would often gather at night, sometimes with priests leading prayers, and shovel furiously until the coffin was exposed. And here's the creepy part. Most people had never actually seen a decomposed body before. So when they cracked that coffin open, everything looked suspicious. Corpses can look weird when they rot. Fingernails and hair seem to keep growing as the skin shrinks back. Gases bloat the stomach so the dead look freshly fed. Blood can leak from the nose and mouth, staining teeth red. And if the climate is cold or the soil dry, bodies might look disturbingly well preserved. To terrified villagers, this wasn't natural decay. It was evidence of feeding. So the next steps were extreme. Cut out the heart. If blood was found inside, that was proof the corpse was still active. Burn the organs. Ashes were either scattered or, worse, mixed into a potion for surviving family to drink. Pin them down. Stakes, sickles, and even plough blades were driven through the body to keep it in place. Mouth control. Some corpses had bricks, stones, or coins shoved between their jaws, because if you can't bite, you can't vamp. It was gruesome, but to the living, it felt like medicine, protection, and good old-fashioned pest control, all rolled into one late-night grave-digging party. Europe's vampire graves. The vampire panic wasn't just folklore, it left behind real archaeological evidence. Across Eastern Europe, especially in places like Poland and Bulgaria, archaeologists have uncovered skeletons buried with sickles across their throats, stakes driven into their chests, or even weighed down with stones and bricks. In one infamous Polish graveyard, a skeleton was found with a sickle placed directly over its neck, like a medieval guillotine on standby. The idea was that if the vampire tried to rise, the sickle would decapitate them instantly. Talk about a booby-trapped burial. In Bulgaria, entire cemeteries show evidence of anti-vampire measures. Iron rods hammered through torsos, bricks shoved in mouths, and even corpses pinned down with farm tools. Basically, a whole community playing zombie whack-a-mole before zombies were even cool. New England gets spooky. The case of Mercy Brown. You'd think this sort of grave-robbing superstition stayed in old Europe, right? Nope. Fast forward to 1892, rural Rhode Island, and we get one of America's last great vampire panics, the case of Mercy Brown. The Brown family was being ravaged by tuberculosis. Mercy, just 19 years old, died in January. When her brother Edwin also fell sick, neighbours convinced the family that one of the recently dead was feeding on him. Cue the midnight grave dig. When they cracked open Mercy's coffin, they were horrified. Her body was unnervingly preserved. Remember, it was January in New England, and she'd basically been kept in natural refrigeration. But to them, it was proof she was still alive. Her heart was cut out, burned, and the ashes mixed into a potion for Edwin to drink. Spoiler alert, Edwin still died. The Mercy Brown case made headlines, and scholars think Bram Stoker even read about it while researching for Dracula, which came out just 5 years later. That's right, The Rhode Island vampire may have helped inspire the most famous bloodsucker of them all. While Mercy Brown gets the most press in the US, Europe's OG vampire celebrity was a man named Jure Grando, a villager in 17th century Croatia. Jure died in 1656, but according to locals, that wasn't the end of him. For 16 years, villagers claimed he rose from his grave at night, knocked on doors, and that anyone who heard his knock soon died. His widow even swore he showed up in her bedroom, terrifying her until she passed out. Finally, the town priest and a group of brave men decided enough was enough. They opened Jure's coffin and found him eerily intact. Rosy cheeks, a wicked grin, like he'd just taken a nap. Naturally, they tried staking him, but the wood bounced right off his chest. So they switched strategies. They cut off his head with a saw. The story goes that he screamed and blood spurted from the wound, proof to them that they'd finally killed the vampire. After that, the village reported peace. Whether or not any of that really happened, the legend of Jure Grando is one of the earliest written accounts of a vampire hunt, and it set the template for centuries of vampire lore. Restless corpses, nighttime hauntings, and a violent graveyard finale. At this point, you might be asking, why vampires? Why not blame witches, demons, or bad air? Well, they kind of did blame those too, but vampires offered a handy explanation for why illness seemed contagious within families. If multiple people in the same household got sick, maybe it wasn't germs, maybe it was Cousin Thomas crawling out of his grave at night to snack on the survivors. Also, let's be honest, people love a scapegoat you can stab. You can't stab miasma or germs if you don't know what they are, but you can stab Uncle John's corpse and feel like you did something about it. Eventually, vampire panics faded. Not because people suddenly stopped being scared, but because science finally caught up. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, germ theory and modern medicine started explaining why people actually got sick. No undead relatives required. But those centuries of fear left a cultural mark. From Eastern European folklore to New England graveyards, these vampire panics gave us much of the imagery we now associate with the undead. Stakes, coffins, wasting sickness. It all got folded into the gothic horror stew that writers like Bram Stoker ladled into Dracula. So next time you binge-watch Interview with the Vampire, or roll your eyes at yet another Twilight reboot, just remember, people once truly believed this stuff. They dug up their own family members, chopped out hearts, and brewed up vampire organ smoothies in the desperate hope of stopping a supernatural disease. Was it gruesome? Absolutely. Was it a hot mess? Without question. But it also shows how humans, when terrified and confused, will do anything to feel like they're in control, even if that means going full Buffy on their own grandma. If you enjoyed this dive into history's creepiest vampire panics, don't let this channel waste away. Give it some life by smashing that like button, subscribing, and leaving us a comment about which historical mess you'd like to see us dig up next. Because unlike Mercy Brown, we thrive on a little bit of attention from the living.